Hi everyone, it's Katrina Fox here, and I've been asked to comment on what I think about the animal rights protests that have been taking place throughout Australia today, and which have brought Melbourne in particular to a complete standstill. I've been asked what I think about the media coverage and whether or not these type of protests are likely to hinder the cause of animal rights and veganism. So just very quickly, for those of you who don't know, there's been a coordinated national day of actions outside slaughterhouses, stopping traffic in the city centres across Australia to celebrate the 1-year anniversary of the documentary Dominion, which is a film by Aussie Farms, which basically has video footage uncovering the terrible realities of animals on Australian farms and in slaughterhouses. It shows some of the terrible abuse and pain and cruelty that's inflicted on farmed animals. So in terms of the media, I'll talk about that briefly first because some of you may know my background is journalism, so I have a bit of an understanding of how the media works. When it comes to mainstream media, they love controversy and they love conflict. So what you're going to be seeing, or we're seeing already, are the headlines around us versus them. So we've got farmers and the animal agriculture industry on one side, and then we've got animal activists and vegans on the other. And the media really love that. And when you look at just the headlines, then there's no real analysis behind that. And obviously that can impact on how people perceive animal activists and vegans. We're portrayed as radical and extreme and dangerous and violent. And the irony of that, of course, is that actually vegans and animal activists are campaigning to get rid of the violence and the torture and the abuse. So I think it's really important for people to look behind the headlines. Now, what you've got to remember about the mainstream media in particular is that many of the advertisers come from within the animal agriculture industry. So they're paying the wages of the staff, of the journalists, and keeping the media outlet afloat. So journalists are hampered by what they can and can't say and how they can report. So it's really important to bear that in mind. The other thing to remember as well is that some of the publishers of these mainstream media outlets may have personal investments in the animal agriculture industry. So they don't want to be losing money as well. So definitely, it's fair to say that some reporters may want to report more honestly and expose the realities of what's going on in the animal agriculture industry, but are not allowed to do so. So that brings us to the question of whether these types of direct action and protests in which people can't get to work, the traffic's delayed, the transport's been delayed, they're late for their meetings, they can't get anywhere. And one argument is, they're going to be really angry and annoyed. They're going to blame the vegans and the animal activists, and that's not going to help to shift them towards living a vegan lifestyle. So certainly there are going to be some people that fall into that camp. They're not going to do any further digging. They're just going to be annoyed, and that's it. But I think there's also going to be a percentage of people who are going to get curious, who are going to want to look behind the headlines, who are going to be asking, why is the transport being stopped? What is this protest? What is this Dominion, this film? And they'll go and check it out and be exposed to the realities of the awful animal torture and cruelty and killing that goes on. And maybe they will have an awakening, a wake-up call, and start their journey towards living a vegan lifestyle and a compassionate lifestyle. And I think even if one person makes that shift, that's a good thing, because it's never one person, because that one person will then influence their family and friends and networks. And then if they only influence one person in their family and friends networks, they then go on to influence others. So it's this ripple effect. Now, I also believe that there is no one single type of animal rights activism that is going to work for everyone. Human beings are just not built that way. We get our wake-up calls, or we come to realizations through many different ways. It might be a leaflet someone's given to you. It might be an online petition that a friend has shared on social media, or a video that somebody shared. It could be a friendly conversation over coffee or tea or at a party. or it could be from these type of direct actions. There is no one way that is the perfect way to do activism, whether it's animal rights activism or other types of activism. So I think the animal rights protests that happened today were good for our cause. I take my hat off. If I had a hat, I would take it off, to the animal rights activists who got out there today and took part in these peaceful protests. And I think it's important to note that these were peaceful protests. But again, regardless of what the headlines might be, and yes, there were arrests because they disrupted the traffic, but this was a peaceful protest by compassionate, kind people whose only aim is to expose the torture and abuse and terrible suffering and cruelty that farmed animals in Australia go through every single day. If you can imagine living every single day of your life in excruciating pain and suffering, wouldn't you want nice, compassionate, good-hearted people to stand up for you and to shake people out of their trances of not knowing what goes on behind, particularly the food that comes onto your plate? So what I would like to do is implore you, particularly if you're someone who's watching this who is not vegan, who still eats meat and dairy and eggs and other animal products, is to look beyond the headlines. Don't just stereotype vegans into this, either peace-loving hippies or dangerous violent cult members, which is ironic really because they're kind of two extremes and opposites. Just look beyond the headlines, click through to the Dominion website, do a little bit of research, be curious, and then come to your own conclusions and make the decisions that are right for you. And of course, I hope that you will take steps towards ultimately living a vegan lifestyle. I also just want to wrap up by saying that this is actually an opportunity. These protests today are actually an opportunity for our Prime Minister, or whoever's going to be our Prime Minister after our upcoming elections, to really take a stand and say, hey, okay, Australians really are not cool with animal cruelty. Something big is happening. We're at a tipping point. And to actually take a stand towards transitioning farmers and the animal agriculture industry out of an industry that's bad for the planet. Animal agriculture is terrible for the environment, bad for animals and bad for people, and actually transition Australia into a thriving, booming plant-based economy. So that means stopping the subsidies and obviously phasing them out. We can't necessarily do this overnight, but it needs to start happening. Phasing out subsidies to the meat and dairy industries and animal agriculture industries, and instead supporting ethical plant-based businesses. It's a win for everyone. It's a win for the animals, of course. It's a win for consumers. It's a win for farmers and the animal agriculture industry. And it's a way, I think, to end this us versus them mentality that I talked about earlier. And it's a way for animal activists and farmers and animal agriculture industry to collaborate on a win-win solution. So those are my thoughts. Happy to hear whatever you think, and feel free to leave comments and let me know.